Alrighty, happy hello from Germany to all my friends in the Nordics. Let me introduce myself. My name is Richard Walch. I'm a Canon ambassador, specialized in action sports all around the globe, I would like to say. But I'm especially happy to be with you guys in the Nordics today, and there's a very special reason. Because I love them. I have all the Nordic countries, and there's a little secret why. And this is here. You can see getting married to my beautiful wife, Charlotte, in Copenhagen. So she's from Denmark. And that's one more reason why I like to spend a lot of time up there in the north. And yeah, so I'm especially happy to join this session today with you, all my friends in Oslo and around there. There's another reason. This is our little daughter, Ingrid, half Nordic. That was from our last trip to Denmark. So you see, there's a lot of connection that I have. What will happen in the next hours? I will take you on a journey. You follow me on my photography. I will talk about also the technical side of things. I have shot with different cameras. That's the Canon EOS R5, one of the newest and hottest babies in town. Then the Canon EOS R6, and also the 1D X Mark III. Those three cameras I will talk about in the next 1 hour. As I told you, I'm specialized in snow and water. Those are my two main subjects I work in. The reason is because I started really young. You can see here, this is one of the skiing shots. When I was 16, all I wanted to do is snowboard around the globe, all these great mountains. And so I hope you can hear me because I have some background noise. One second, let me check this here. Should be good. Okay, let's continue. Let me just text our operator here. Okay. Well, back to the skiing and snowboarding. So as I said, photograph what you love. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give you. You have to find something that you really like, because then you're going to be more passionate about it and you have more energy and more power than anybody else. So that's what you should do. In my case, that's skiing and snowboarding. When I was 16, I was just in love with snowboarding, and I still am. And as I said, all I wanted to do is go around the world and ride these great mountains. And it actually worked. First I thought I would become a professional snowboarder, but my snowboarding was not good enough. And then, I just turned around and I said, okay, why don't I try photography? And I took my camera always with me on the mountains and photographing my friends who were actually a little bit better than me. And it also turned out really nicely because I became a professional photographer, long story short, and I could follow my friends around the globe and getting this amazing experience. Check this out. This is what I call a super selfie. You can see me out of the helicopter, and then you see Sven Kühnle on the right, this little dot doing a mega jump of about 25 meters on this crazy pitch in Alaska. Now we go to Europe. Please meet Leilani Ettel. She's the daughter of the guy I started to shoot snowboarding with. She's also a real champion. And here I was shooting with her in Laax, Switzerland. It's one of the biggest and most beautiful pipes we have in Europe. Check this out. The airtime, she gets is scary. Her dad just turns around, you can't see it, and she's going as high as the boys, and that's incredible high. Now let's jump to the water. How did that happen from skiing and snowboarding to water? That happened with the America's Cup, the 32nd America's Cup, which took place in Valencia. I applied for the job and I was lucky. I passed all the others, and I was the only team photographer for that I have to say, I was a member of the German team, and kind of overnight, I was able to shoot sailing in the highest class. I could keep some of my clients, for example, Audi, and this is one of the shoots I did with Audi at Lake Garda. Crazy setup, you know. They wanted a sunset shoot, but as you know, in sailing, when the sun goes down, there's not a lot of wind, so it's a sunrise shoot we did there. Another shot from the time in America's Cup. That's Nice, early morning, 7 o'clock, beautiful backlit situation. Or another form of water, surfing. This is actually one of the test shootings I did with the 1D X Mark III. To really show the low light performance is Andy Schmal, a very talented surfer. And this is actually wake surfing. So he's surfing behind a motorboat. Yeah, you know, now we have, you kind of know me, and I hope you're interested and you say, well, I want to know more about Richard and what he's doing. Then please log on to social media. You find me on Facebook or Instagram. I think Instagram is probably the easiest and the best for photographers. So please join me on my journey. Help me to get some more followers, and then we can stay in contact. If you have a question, just send me a message there. It's one of the easiest ways to interact with each other. Now, one more little story about the north, because it fits perfectly. I went on a trip from Bergen all the way to Kirkenes, and you know, this is one of the famous fjords there, where with this Hurtigruten ship, it goes into this fjord. On the left and the right side, there's only a couple of meters space, and then at the end it turns around and goes back out. Amazing landscape, beautiful landscape you have there in Norway. And I was on that trip to test a new lens from Canon. But check out this crazy rainbow I was able to photograph there. I was, you know, on deck, and always when the sister ship meets the ship, they tell you. So I was always outside to photograph when it passes by, and then I just looked around and I was able to capture this incredible image. And that's because of this zoom lens. It's a 28 to 240, so you know, really big reach you can have with this lens. And I was testing it on the EOS RP, so that's the smallest full frame camera in the Canon lineup, a mirrorless version of it. And it's kind of like your entrance model. But it worked really nice on that trip. Here you can see up there in the mountains in the north. Yeah, again, you know, I love it when you see these great mountains and they go directly into the sea. They're called the Lyngen Alps. Okay, so now let's go to the first of the new cameras, Canon EOS R5. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this camera, and now there is. It's here, and I hope you guys are as stoked as I am, but here, check it out. This is my version, EOS R5 with the 70 to 200 2.8, and you know, what's so incredible is how small this package is. You know, I don't really need to go through the technical specs with you, because you can read these on the webpage, and you probably heard a lot about tutorials about what people think about that camera. I think what I'd like to concentrate on is, you know, how I use it and what's in the bag for me, and maybe if you shoot something similar, it's the same in the bag for you. So what was the test scenario I was going into? It's boxing. Boxing is a very, very fast sport. So really difficult, a big challenge for the camera. On this shoot, I was using EOS R5. I was using the 2870 2.0, a very powerful lens, because it's, you know, as I just said, it's 2.0. So it's, you know, it has a very shallow depth of field if you open it up all the way, which I did in the shooting. And you're very versatile because it's a zoom lens 2070. Please meet Alem Begic. He's one of the most talented boxers we have in Germany, highly decorated. And you can see we're in a fitness studio, Ever Studio in Munich, where you can do exercise and stuff, and he uses this for his training. And you can see the lighting setup that I used. I used 2 Cineflow lights, one on the left side and one on the right side, to light up Harlem. So for the action, for this first portrait, no flash. Okay, here you can see what you can do with 20 frames per second. You probably know that in a mechanical shutter, you can use 12 frames per second, and on the electronic shutter, you can shoot with 20 frames per second. But what does that mean? When do you need 20 frames per second? And is it interesting for you? I mean, it's definitely gonna fill up your card really quickly, but you can see here, before they box, they put this tape around their fingers and then ask him to just throw the tape towards me. A really fast and playful moment. And I was able to capture this image where his face is framed with this bandage. It's something that takes hours if you shoot it with a single shot or a low frame rate. But when you shoot it with 20 frames per second, it was probably 5 or 6 times, and then I had this shot. So in a nutshell, you can just shoot more risky. You can try out stuff that you were not so sure about before, and you can just push your photography just a little bit further. But this, let's go back. I was a little bit too quick. This kind of sums it up. The magic about this camera is the combination of the AF face tracking and this fast shutter speed. These boxes are, when he hits, by the time you kind of realize what's going on, it's already too late. So you have to, kind of pre-anticipate the move, then roll the shutter. So for that, those 20 frames per second is really handy, but you want the sharpness to just be perfect. What is perfect? I mean, in a sporting image, one thing has to be sharp, and that's usually the eyes of the athlete. So here you can see the eyes are just incredibly sharp, and you're like, that's what drives you when you look at a picture. You understand his power and his force when you look into his eyes. Now, for you as a photographer, it's quite easy with the EOS R5, because this AF face detection just works incredibly solid. As soon as you point the camera towards the athlete, the camera will find the eye and will just wander around the eye. And when you hold the camera still and the athlete start to move in your frame, it will follow him or her directly. Now, the camera is so smart that if Alem turns around and I just see the back of his head, it will still keep the focus on the head. And as soon as the eye is visible again, boom, blinks to the eye. So when you're photographing, all you need to do is you focus on the framing, and the camera will just perform and make sure that it's in focus. So it's incredible. It's kind of like when you are a portrait photographer, and that has nothing to do with action. It's just you're shooting portraits. What you can do is you don't even have to look through the camera. You can hold the camera here. You keep your interaction with your subject, with your model, and the camera will do the rest. You just blink through, look at the screen a little bit if the framing is correct, but you can just talk to your model and just keep on shooting, and you're sure that the portrait is just tech sharp. So if you use this camera the same way that you used your camera before, you probably won't, find such a dramatic difference. But if you start to use the camera in a different way, then you will quickly tool is. I said at the beginning that I didn't use flash for the action, but for the portraits, I use flash. It's a flash on the left side or on the right side, and a beauty dish very high above his head, close to his head, but straight above his head. And that kind of, it's the best light to shape the body of the athlete. I mean, he has an incredible body, as you can see, but if you use this kind of technique, it looks even better and even more dramatic. To be very open about it, when you shoot with the electronic shutter and you have a flash that's really powerful, you cannot flash 20 frames per second. That's something that you can only do with the 1D X Mark III. We'll talk about this a little later, this camera. But if you shoot it with a mechanical shutter, you can do it. I mean, this is a classic situation where you can shoot with a single shot, because it's not about a sequence here, it's just about getting the most beautiful image. One more thing that's quite striking about EOS R5 is the resolution. It's 45 megapixel. So, you know, we're getting really close to the good old EOS EOS R. No, sorry, the EOS 5D R. That's what I wanted to say. You know, with 50 megapixels, you know, I always loved these files for the detail. And now, you know, it's even better. You have these powerful, crazy fast camera, and on top of that, you get these huge files. So if you work in fine art or in landscape where you're really, really fanatic about these details, then 45 megapixel is just magic for you. If you're shooting in journalism and you're more about turning images around fast, and, you know, kind of like A3 is as big as you usually go, then you might want to consider an EOS R6. That's the camera we'll talk about a little later. Okay, back to the boxing. Again, another shot. This 2870 2.0, what it can do, you know, the depth of field is so shallow that you can see behind his cheek, the ears. That's where you start to losing the focus. It's only in the eye, but it just becomes much stronger. I mean, that's something that you probably know. If you really want to, you know, highlight an area in a face or just something, then open your f-stop all the way so the depth of field gets really, really low. And then the closer you get, the more this effect becomes more and more dramatic. And that's where you can really, you know, get some beautiful portraits, or just, you know, just something a little different. Now, see, I told you can start to shoot more risky. Look at this one. You can see the eye just coming above the arm. It's something that is impossible in manual focus or with an out of focus system that's not as powerful as this one. It would be just a lucky punch or a lucky shot. But here it's something you can kind of almost aim for, because you just find an angle where you just barely see the eye, and then you just, you know, get it going, like get it rolling, you know, 20, 40, 60, 80 shots in one burst, no problem. With the new, I'm using a SanDisk Extreme Pro CF Express card, and that card is so powerful. It has a download speed of 1,700. Amazing. So, you know, forget all the numbers. It just means you can roll easily 100 images and the camera will not lock down. Now, I promised you I will talk not only about EOS R5, I will also talk about EOS R6. And yeah, here we are. So that's kind of like the sister or the brother of EOS R5. If you look at the body from the outside, they're very, very similar. The only difference that you will see is on the outside, there is this LCD screen here, and EOS R6 doesn't have an LCD screen. It's just a dial. But that's kind of it from the outside. From the inside, there is a difference, and that's the sensor. The sensor has less resolution, has around 20 megapixels, kind of like a 1D X Mark III. It's actually the characteristics of that sensor is very similar to the 1D X Mark III. So that means if you go into high ISO, you know, 50,000 or even higher, then this sensor is extremely powerful. I would say it's in that high ISO range is even better than the EOS R5, because resolution always works against noise in high ISO. Or if your thing is sports and you're shooting it for news and for the media, then usually you don't really want these extra large files, because when you have a file that is shot with a full frame camera with 45 megapixel, it's going to be a big file. So to wire that out of a stadium, or to send at the end of the game your 20 highlight shots via FTP upload or by email is going to be really, really hard. So if that's your daily routine, then you're probably much better off with buying maybe 2 EOS R6, having 2 lenses, or you know how it is. It's, you can never have enough, but one is what you really need. It just depends on your style of shooting, and of course, on your budget. We have to be honest here. Nothing is for free. So EOS R6, but before I take you to the stadium, I was lucky enough to get the job from Canon to shoot a video about EOS R6. So I will take you with me onto this presentation, and let me share this video with you. It's right here. There it is, and
So dit is alles Licht.
I live just 10 minutes from the stadium and I've never been here. It's a shame, because Speedway, it's amazing. They all come here and they hang out on the Speedway track and do their racing. It's full of adrenaline, the sport. I live just 10 minutes from the stadium and I've never been here. It's a shame, because Speedway, it's amazing. They all come here and they hang out on the Speedway track and do their racing. It's full of adrenaline, the sport.
okay.
Rider, and then the automatic takes over. It's crazy how the autofocus just grabs the rider, and even most of the time today I was shooting AF face tracking. But you know what the magic is? There's a function now where you can freely move your AF center point to that part in the frame where you think the action will start to happen. The motorbiker comes into that part of the frame, it catches the rider, and then the automatic takes over. It's crazy how the autofocus just grabs the rider and even the face of the rider and just locks onto it, and you can just pan through the corner. I'm actually camera is fast enough so it doesn't lock up. The face recognition even works on this kind of sports when they wear helmets and goggles and stuff like that. We have 2 different shutter modes. You can shoot with a mechanical shutter, that's 12 frames per second, or you can choose the electronic shutter, that's 20 frames per second. And as you can see here, in one sequence, that's 37 sharp images, and just check out the detail. That's pretty impressive. This is the 100 to 500 millimeter zoom. It's f4.5 to 7.1, so it gives you a little bit of extra range. What's interesting to know, when you put it at 400, it's 5.6. I'm doing a panning shot right now, so the background becomes blur. It's stabilizing mode 2, that's perfect for these pans, and then you try to be as steady as possible and just cruise along with the rider. Now it's about portraits of these devil hell riders at 2.0, and in combination with the AF tracking of the eye, beautiful. You get an endless amount of images that are sharp, and you can choose the best one that you would like. The video that you're watching right now is shot with the EOS R6. You have a frame rate of 120 frames in full HD or 60 frames in 4K. Now you have image stabilization in the lens and you have image stabilization in the camera body, and they work together. Clemens, our camera operator, he could just use the camera handheld, really run and gun, and dual card slots. Normally I use a 1D X Mark III, and the EOS R6 feels like a brother, just the mirrorless version of it. The magic about the electronic shutter is it's silent. You don't even hear it. All you see is in your viewfinder is a little white frame that starts to blink. I think if you've used a 6D Mark II or 7D Mark II and you want to move into mirrorless, this is your perfect choice and your perfect camera.
Geschraubt wird von früh bis spät, ja, aus, ja ein. Ich fahre solange ich leben tue.
Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, so yeah, I mean, pretty crazy, huh? What's going on there with these Speedway riders? I mean, let's first maybe talk a little bit about the Speedway before we go into the technical things. I mean, to be very honest with you, what's the most difficult for me today is to find some crazy subjects I can shoot. I mean, why do I say crazy? It needs to be something that, you know, that is just fascinating in the first place. You know, to take a nice picture, that's my job, but that's kind of what I'm trained for over the last 30 years. So that's not really a problem, but to find something that is interesting and really can, you know, bring these cameras in a challenge, you know, this is so powerful that if you just walk in the park with it, you know, you can do it with your phone, to be honest. But if you find something that is, you know, a difficult shooting scenario and that is dirty or wet or cold or hot or something like that, you know, then it becomes a challenge and then it becomes fun for me as well. And in this case, you know, Canon called me up in the middle of the Corona lockdown, and they said, you know, we want you to pull off magic. Here's the camera. Surprise us. Well, thanks for the trust, and that was good. But I mean, that's really difficult, you know, if there's basically kind of like no events going on, and you have to stay at least 1.5 meters away from everything. And I mean, how should you do something amazing? I was just lucky because, you know, the Speedway Stadium is kind of where I live. It's 10 minutes from my house. And I called them up and they say, hey, look, we have a training that is very controlled, so there's no spectator, but there is a way we can get you in and you can just come along and try to shoot your movie and get some images. And that was just, you know, then I was in heaven because I knew that this sport has a lot of style. You know, that's also the next challenge you have is you need to find something that that doesn't, you know, have millions of logos. Like if you go to the Formula One, then of course that is action pure, but there's so many restrictions that at the end of the day with these images, you cannot really do anything. Here, you know, it's a little more chill, it's a little more easy. It's an amateur sport, you know, where people are really fascinated about what they do, but, you know, there's not a lawyer behind every door. Okay, what are the tools? You can see it here, EOS R6, right now with the 15 to 35 millimeter 2.8, 2470 2.8, 70-200 2.8. That's the lens you see here. It's actually called the Trinity because they all three lenses start with 2.8 and from, you know, from the beginning to the end, just one f-stop. Then you can see on the right side, the little bigger lens. It's a 100 to 500, starts at 4 and goes all the way up at 7.1. Okay, let's get the numbers out of the way. You'd say 7.1 at 500 millimeter. Well, that's not really so amazing. Yes, you're right. If you compare it to your, you know, the thinking, you know, but you have to take a couple of things in consideration. Number one, you know, it has kind of the same specs as the EF version, the 100 to 400, until you go to 400. Only in the last reach to 500, the f-stop goes to 7.1. That's number one. Number two is all of these new cameras have an incredible bump in ISO, high ISO performance. So if I look at my files from 5D Mark IV, for example, and compare them to an EOS R6 or I kind of double the ISO and it looks the same. So you just have to approach it a little different. You know, once you shoot this camera and you go to zoom all the way out to 500, you just have to take the ISO up and maybe shoot with the 800 or 1000 ISO, where before you would maybe shoot with 400 or 200. But please try it. My experience is you won't see a difference. You won't see a lot of noise or anything like that. That's just where, you know, they really did their homework and where it's just technological progress that you can use. Okay, here we go. Speedway. What is it? You know, it's a motorbike, it's some dirt, and off they go. What I didn't know, you know, they don't have a brake. I mean, this here, it looks like a brake, but they told me that they never brake. There's actually a picture you see a little later. It says, Bremsen macht die Felgen dreckig. You know, that's a German expression. In English, it kind of means if you hit the brakes, you put dirt on the rims. So that's what they don't want. So these motorbikes are actually designed, they can only, you know, kind of go in a left turn, because that's the only thing they do. So they can never go in a right turn, and they don't have a brake. So it's exactly not the bike you want to take on the street. It's only good for going in these oval courses, but that they can do really, really good. Now, when you shoot these kind of sports, you know, you can either go very high shutter speed to freeze the action, or very low shutter speed with a panning to get this blurry background. I think that's usually the better way to show what's going on, and so you really get a feeling for the speed, because if everything is sharp, you know, the background and the rider, then you kind of don't really understand how fast they were going. Here you can see me, you know, using the 100 to 500, and there you can also see the top of the camera. So you see EOS R6 has this dial, and that's the difference to EOS R5, where you have this elegant screen. Now, who's the riders? You know, I promised you it's an amateur sport. So, you know, every walk of life you see that. The gentleman on the right, you know, he's been racing all his life. And in the video, you know, at the end he says, you know, I'm going to, you know, work on my bike until I die. It's just what I love the most. And that's what I want to do. And then this lady there, she's the co-pilot of, I think it was her husband. You know, they go on these crazy tandem bikes. And, you know, big respect for her. I mean, it's also quite dangerous, because you're in the middle of this gravel flying around, and then, you know, to completely trust them. I guess that you can always do if you're married, you trust each other. But you know, in sports it's a different thing. And then look at these bikes, you know, the beautiful details. I mean, they kind of remind me on Evel Knievel, the crazy motorbiker who did this incredible jump in the US. But look at it, you know, flames on the boots, and then golden stars on the rims, and yeah, just beautiful details they have. You see, I'm really excited about this is because it's something I can show in my photography. And that's why I told you it's so important to find something that you really like, and it's something that's interested to you, because then you will find these beautiful details and images and moments in something to create an interesting story. Look at this bike, huh? It's crazy. Okay, here you see me. Okay, it's a little bit of a posing image, but I need to take some time to talk about safety. When you shoot these adrenaline sports, of course, it is dangerous, because if the guy here on his, that's actually the tandem bike, if he makes a mistake and he cuts to the left, he's kind of like 2 meters away from me in this image, and I have no time to jump up and get out of the shot. So you always have to think about your exit room. I mean, if something happened, what will happen? And then you need to talk to the athletes. I could only do this image at the end of the day because I understood the action, what's happening. And I specifically talked to the rider, say, okay, are you okay if I go this close? Is this the right corner for you to do the action? And he always says, yes, you know, don't worry, I've done this a million times. You can stand right there, just don't move, and everything will be fine. So please don't just, get super excited and get as close as you can. Always think about the consequences, talk to the athletes, and of course, the biggest piece of advice I can give you, just work with the pros or work with people who are really, really good. I mean, the better they are, the more close you can get, and just really look for these talents and work with them. If you just show up at a sport arena and you start to shoot everybody, and then people also get excited if you come around with a camera, and if they don't know what you're doing and you don't know what they're doing, it doesn't take long until you get hit. And I got hit, when I was not even 20, and I was actually in Stryn, so also in Norway, in Stryn on the glacier. I was standing very stupid in the landing of a hit, and of course, the snowboarder number 5, he came a little short. He landed right on my chest. So I learned it the hard way, and I would like you to do it the easy way. So just do crazy stuff, but think about it and talk about it before you execute. Okay, back to the action and back to EOS R. I mean, this is, I would say, kind of like generation 2 already of the mirrorless camera from Canon. But just a little recap, why is this so important, and why is this, if you ask me, the future? It is because the mount, the RF mount, is significantly bigger than the EF mount of the DSLR cameras that I'm still using and you can use today. And also, to get this straight off the off the back, there's nothing wrong with a 5D with the EOS 5D Mark IV or with the 1D X Mark III, or all of these beautiful DSLRs. They've done an amazing job. They will do an amazing job. It just depends on your personal taste, what you want and which direction you want to develop. If you newly come into the game and you have a little bit of budget and you want to buy a new camera, I would advise you go straight into the mirrorless, because that's where the future of all development is. But if you already have equipment and you're quite happy with it, then there's nothing wrong. Then stay happy and concentrate on getting some great shots. But I want to explain you, what's the difference and where is it going to lead to. I mean, the main difference is that this mount is bigger, so more light hits onto the sensor. You cannot see the sensor now because there's a little curtain. If I put the camera on, then you can see the curtain. That's also something very small but very smart. Now, what an electronic sensor really likes, if the light hits directly to the sensor, it doesn't want to be bent around. Then you use image. So if you look at the Canon lenses, some of the lenses are much smaller than the EF lenses, and others are actually bigger and more heavy. And that's because Canon went 2 ways. They designed lenses that are smaller, so they made use of this new ways of construction. So for example, a 35mm 1.8 is a very compact and small lens, also affordable, or the 90mm 2.0 that was released a couple of months ago. But then if you look at the 2870 2.0, it's a very big and also heavy lens. But what you get is you get kind of the power of 3 fixed prime lenses. And then if you think about 3 prime lenses versus 1 zoom, then it's not so big and heavy anymore. Or if you look at the 70 to 200 2.8, it's very small. You can almost put it vertical in your photo backpack. So they really made sure the construction, they go into a new way. And that's what I really like about Canon, that they have the balls to rethink what they're doing, to take a blank piece of paper and start all over again. And that's actually what one of the engineers said. That was during the world premiere in London about two years ago, when EOS R was presented, and I was on stage with the department leader of the photography department in Canon. He said, an engineer one day came into his office and says, "Chief, if you want me to push the boundaries and to just keep on progressing, we have to start all over again." And all over means a new mount. And you know what? Canon has done this kind of every 25 years. So it's a really important part in the history of Canon. And okay, so rocket science, other manufacturers have done this at the same time or maybe a little earlier even, but you have to think that Canon has more than 100 million lenses out there. So to say kind of auf Wiedersehen to 100 million lenses is quite a big move. Well, it's not auf Wiedersehen or goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen is the German goodbye bye, because there's these EF adapters, and these adapters work really great on these cameras, because the secret is the camera speaks the native EF language to talk to an EF lens, and it speaks the new RF language to talk to an RF lens. So you don't lose anything. You're not lost in translation. It's just, it's kind of like it can speak Norwegian and Danish, so it can speak both. Now, what does that mean for you as a photographer? Look at this image. This is something that really shows again how powerful this out of focus system is, because we talked about it, AF eye tracking, but you don't really see the eyes, because these helmets and these glasses and goggles they're almost impossible to see. But the out of focus is so smart that it can still hold the focus on the head of the rider. And then, you just choose the image that you really like, the best one, and you can just be a little more critical than before and just look for this picture that has everything you were dreaming about. Now I zoomed in a little bit, look at the details. It's pretty amazing. Now, this 100 to 500 gives you a lot of flexibility, because you can so quickly go from 100 to 500. And why is this good? Because when you come to a situation where what you've not shot before, like I've never shot Speedway, usually it takes me a couple of sessions or hours to really understand the sport and understand the angles and where do you have to be when. But if you have such a versatile lens, I'd say you're 25% faster than before. Or when I think about my sailing shoots, when I'm on a boat and it's rough waters and it's shaking, you have something in your hand that is a little more light. That's also very handy. So I highly recommend you, if you like to work with long lenses, for example, that's what my wife tells me, that there's a lot of bird photographers in Norway. I mean, for bird photography, it's perfect. You get close, you're very quick to find the bird and to follow the bird. So that's your lens. Okay, back to the Speedway. Also, just a little more basic photography info that you can use, with whatever camera you want to use it with. I told you that I prefer a panning shot. Now, the trick is you always have to find out the shutter speed that each sport needs. In my case, I think it was around 180th of a second, 120th of a second, something like that. If you shoot a Formula One car, you probably have to go up even higher. If you shoot a horse or a rider, you have to go up a little lower. But long story short, it doesn't really matter. You just try to find out which is the right shutter speed, and then you just, you have to go on and on and on. Now here, two things help you: the high frame rate and the out of focus. Out of focus makes sure everything is tech sharp. The high frame rate means you can choose from a lot of different pictures. Now, one more thing is important. On a Canon lens, you have image stabilization mode 1, 2, 3. For the panning, if you put it on mode 2, it takes away this shake, but doesn't take away this. So left and right will still be there, because that's what you need for panning, but up and down, it will work against it. And then you have very quickly a very good result. But one more information about this. Image stabilization, as you know from Canon, it's always been in the lens. And now, okay, everybody, including myself, ask for that. Nothing. We want to have image stabilization also in the camera. They listened, as always. Sometimes it takes a little longer for Canon to put the answer, but when they come with an answer, it's usually a solid answer. And that's what we have again in this model. So the camera has an image stabilization inside the camera. So what does it mean? There's a sensor, and here's the RF mount, and the sensor kind of can freely move in this mount and help you to get amazing results. I mean, for example, what can you do? A friend of mine, Ulla Lohmann, she's also an ambassador, and she works in nature photography and in adventures and stuff. And she went on a kayak trip. So she jumped in the water, and she shot a picture of her husband kayaking towards her, and handheld slow shutter speed to show the speed of the water. So, or another Wanda Martin, she's a very talented portrait fashion photographer, and she shot a dancer jumping up in the air. So again, just find new ways of shooting and use these techniques to create some amazing results. Okay, here you can see me on the roof. Yeah, I was connected with a rope, so again, safety first, but I really wanted to use this challenging angle from up there, and it's worth, if it's kind of like the drone position, but you can shoot with the zoom, so even better. And it does some magic to your pictures. I think you just have to try it out for yourself. If you ever have a chance to shoot straight down, do it. You are not going to regret it. The other thing that I was really passionate about is, to go on to a ride with them. So what's nice about EOS R5 and R6, there's a flip out screen now. So you can kind of, jump on a bike. One hand you need to hold, the other hand you need to press the shutter, and you can look at the screen, see if your frame is kind of. But to be realistic, I mean, he was going as slow as he could. Otherwise, there would be no chance to hold on to the back. We're also the only ones on the track, because if you're behind another bike, it just kills you with the gravel. And I had a helmet, but not enough protection for that. And also, I didn't want to ruin the EOS R6. It's a prototype camera back at that moment. And I can tell you one thing, you're not really popular at Canon if you ruin their prototypes. That's a point where they're a little sensitive. But fair enough, I can understand. Okay, here, this is now one of these images shot from above. Crazy, huh? Or this is the one where I was sitting on the bike. I told you you can use an EF lens as well. So here I'm using an EF lens to the 200 to 400, 4.0. This is kind of my favorite shot. It shows all this crazy gravel flying around, and it shows them in the middle of the action. That's my favorite picture from that session. One more of these beautiful panning shots. All you're missing is this, but then you kind of right there. Here you see Clemens. Clemens was the cameraman. He shot the making of that you just saw at the beginning of my presentation. I could do a whole presentation about video as well. We don't have the time today, but it's also a very beautiful video camera, because you see he doesn't use an image stabilization device, no gimbal, nothing. Because of the internal image stabilization of the lens and the camera works very beautiful together, he can really shoot run and gun. And I told you, you can just try stuff you could not have done before. This is a picture that I shot out of a panning and zooming at the same time. And when he was close to the camera, kind of at 500, I get this amazing image. And please try it out. Sometimes the detail shows more about what's going on than the overall picture. Okay, so now let's move on. This is a doubler. Okay, 1 second here. This we've already seen. Now let's move to Kamchatka. Okay, because we have another 10 minutes, and there also needs to be some time for them questions. So I think I have to speed it up a little bit, and I explain you about Kamchatka. Kamchatka was a trip I did in March. So that was before the lockdown. That was also before EOS R6 and 5 was launched. So back in the day, there was no question. If you wanted to go sports, you would choose one weapon, and that's EOS-1D X Mark III. And there's still a lot of reasons why this camera is just unbeaten and my number one, because it's the most toughest camera is in the line. An R5 and an R6 body has some plastic parts, and EOS-1D X is completely built out of metal. So it's just more tough. It has a very, very big battery, so you can shoot for hours and you can shoot for days, even if it gets really cold. So when I go to these very remote locations, and Kamchatka, I tell you, is remote. It's all the way to the end of Russia. And you're almost in Japan already. And you know, when you're there on a photo shoot, you don't want to have a breakdown and then don't get those images home. So here you really, really depend. And then a tough and powerful camera is the most important what you need. Now look at this landscape. You know, the beauty there is that you're always on the coast. So you shoot skiing, snowboarding with a view to the coast. But before you do so, you land in Petropavlovsk. It's this crazy city there. And when you fly in, you see the first gigantic volcano. And there's almost hundreds of volcanoes on Kamchatka. So wherever you look, you see a volcano. And that's why we get there. It was a session for Bogner, for Willy Bogner. It's a clothing company. They have a sub-label called Fire and Ice. You do the math. Fire and ice, volcano and skiing, that's a perfect match. So that's what our mission was all about. Before we got to the camp, we had to load all our gear on this crazy truck. Then we drove there. And here you see at the helipad, all these helicopters are parked. You know, in Kamchatka, this is kind of like the bus fleet. You know, it's kind of like the Flixbus of Kamchatka, because there's not a road going to every end of the country. It's so wild that they use this crazy old big massive helicopters. Think about 20 people can sit inside, and I felt actually quite safe, because every evening they went back to the main airport where they were serviced. So yes, it is very old technology, but to me the impression was it's quite reliable. And let's take you straight to what we promised and what we also delivered. We wanted to snowboard into an active volcano. So on day 2, we hit kind of jackpot. We flew out there on this volcano. And what's so exciting is that this volcano creates its own microclimate. So that's and everything, because we got there, and then for an hour the riders were already on the other side. Maybe I can show you the mouse. They were kind of over here, and I was standing on this side where you see him standing now, trying to talk to them by radios and find out when is the perfect moment to send them down. Sometimes you need to have a lot of patience, but you know, I pulled it off, and here you see this is the magic. This is the money shot on the left side. You see the volcano, you know, spitting not fire, that would be a little too much, but spitting white smoke. I mean, you can clearly see it's active, and they're skiing and snowboarding down into this volcano. This is Sven Kühnle, a good friend of mine. He's at the bottom of the volcano after an amazing run, and just, you know, he's seen a lot of things in the world, but something like that, it's also a first for him. And this is what's so beautiful about Kamchatka, that you think about it, the helicopter just dropped off on the peak, and then he does a 360-degree loop around the peak to show us, you know, so we can get this image of the helicopter and this crazy background. And that's why I love my job, because, you know, I'm searching for these incredible moments, and then all you have to do is concentrate and stay focused and shoot the images. Like here, I'm again strapped into the helicopter, but then they opened the door, and I was able to, you know, on the flight home, to shoot these sunset images. And wow, I mean, what a job, huh? So here are 2 of the highlight images, and a tip for you: when you shoot skiing, you as a photographer or snowboarding, you should always stay higher than the models. So looking down actually makes a slope look very steep. Looking up makes a slope usually look flat, and these slopes are steep. So by shooting them in a way that they make him look less respectful is wrong. So always stay at the same level or higher when you shoot skiing. And here, you know, as I explained you know, you always have to ask yourself why I'm here. I'm here for these volcanoes, and I'm in here to show how crazy close they can ski to the coast. And that's what these images show you. And then, you know, funniest thing is we really could reach this the shore. You know, a helicopter is, you're really flexible. So for the lunch break, they flew us to the shore. And of course, when Ben is the guy in front, was a very talented skier from Munich, they were just playing catch with the waves. I mean, I explained you why I use the 1D X Mark III. It's because it's a solid workhorse, you know, a little bit similar than this helicopter. And, you know, I was snowboarding with the team. My crew was very small. I had a 70-200 2.8. I had a 2470 and actually a 1635 4.0 because it's a little smaller, and a teleconverter 1.4, and that was it. That was all I had, but I could pack it in a very small Evoque Avalanche backpack. So I was able, if I had to pull a trigger, then inflate some balloon, and if the avalanche would catch me, that my chance of survival is higher, because then in theory this balloon brings you up to the surface. But you see, sometimes you're forced to really limit yourself. I could also not bring two cameras, so I really needed one. That's why 1D X Mark III is perfect for this kind of journey. Okay, here you see Renilla on a snowboard turn, but I think if I want to give you a chance for some questions, please start firing them, because we only have a couple of minutes left. Another beautiful moment, there was suddenly a dog in the valley, and while we were waiting for the helicopter to land, this dog was just running like crazy towards Sven. I mean, all you have to do is don't be too shocked that you don't press the button, and if you're not, and I wasn't, you just hold on it and get shot. Here, you know, the snow conditions are not as, you know, you cannot compare it to Utah where you have champagne powder, or Canada or Japan. But we were lucky, we got really good conditions to get these shots. But, you know, we went there, we wanted these volcanoes. And please meet Alex. He's the cameraman from Very Media, really cool crew of people. I've been quite a couple of projects with them. And he used the 1D X Mark III as a motion camera. And here you can see him in the helicopter. One more picture of Renilla shredding down into the volcano. And then another beautiful landscape image. And this is kind of like the highlight image of the shot. It shows Sven doing one of his signature tricks. It's a corked back loop. And you know, what a shot. And it is at the end of the day, the crew was already down there chasing us to come down because they were waiting for us. But that's when you need the pros, because you can just pull it off, perfect style, stump the landing, off we go, happy campers. Okay, so now let me show you a tiny little 1-minute film. What Kamchatka was all about in a nutshell. It just gives you a first impression, but I think that could be a really nice ending for our presentation here.
It's like the end of the world. We're here with a group of skiers and snowboarders, all very talented and eager to ride these volcanoes here in Kamchatka. If the risk is not seen in the photograph, why take it? So you always have to calculate how far you want to go, how far you want to push yourself, how far you want to push the riders especially.
You know, when you shoot in the mountains and you want to make it look steep, the best is you're above the line actually, or you're to the side. The worst is to shoot straight up the mountain. Then the mountain looks flat. So we want to make it look steep, and it is steep.
When the riders are on the same pace, they also want to get these pictures. So you kind of work on the same mission together, and that's what's the fun part.
That was the shot.
Camera is the ticket for me to the world. I like to go on these journeys, and if I can come to a place like this, of course I photograph every minute, because when I'm home, that's the only thing that's left is my images and my memory on such an amazing experience.
Okay, here I am. I'm back. I think that's it. It's a wrap. My time is up. So I was a little unfair. But to make it for you and for a happy end, I encourage you, send me personal messages on Instagram, and I will try to answer them for you. I'm sorry, I was just carried away by all these experiences. I hope you could still learn something, and you could feel some of the passion, and you go out and do some crazy stuff and get some amazing images. And please find the right camera for you. And the best advice is just go try it out, feel it out for yourself. What's the best? I'm happy with those tools, and I hope I could light up the fire for you a little bit. So thank you very much. Again, the best greetings to the Nordics. Thank you for joining.